Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Stoner Report. I'm Marius Stoner, Associate Editor of Cannabis Culture Magazine, here at 307 West Hastings Street, the BCMP Vapor Lounge. Yeah, we've got a few people here today already down on the second floor. It's kind of sunny, a little cloudy, but the sun's coming out, so it's getting quite warm. I'm overdressed. I'm going to be sweating all day. But yeah, that's how things are in Vancouver. We're still waiting to hear when Mark gets back. The timeline right now is between 2 and 4 weeks. Hopefully, that would be really awesome, but we really can't say for sure. But he's hanging in there. I talked to him a couple of days ago. He seemed fine and good spirits. Yeah, can't wait to see him again. Look forward to seeing him back. So thank you everyone for joining me. I'm sorry I'm starting off a little late, but here I am. I'm going to light a joint now because I missed 220. But if you've got them, then you might as well smoke them now. Okay, let's start off with this week's news. Where is he? There we are. Oops. There we go. The Vancouver police search illegal marijuana shop. Police say they received reports that weed was being purchased at Jim's Weeds Lounge and sold to neighborhood youth. Police searched what they called an illegal East Vancouver marijuana shop Thursday afternoon after receiving reports that weed was being purchased at the store and then sold to neighborhood youth. There were 3 staff members and 5 customers at Jim's Weeds Lounge at 882 East Hastings Street when officers executed their search warrant, but no arrests were made at the time, said Sergeant Randy Finchman, a spokesman for the Vancouver Police Department, in a news release. Finchman gave few further details, but said police would respond to any complaints about illegal marijuana use and sales and decide if further investigation or enforcement action is required. A man answering the phone at Jim's Weeds Lounge Thursday declined to be interviewed. "I'm not interested in any of that. Please hang up and try later." No comment, he said before hanging up. Jim's Weeds Lounge ships BC Bud, joints, hash, resin, edible products infused with cannabis and other marijuana products across Canada, according to the information posted on its website. Medical marijuana producers attempting to woo doctors. Representatives of licensed medical marijuana companies are being sent to doctors' offices as part of the push to get hesitant physicians to prescribe the drug more often. It's a development that has dismayed Dr. Louis Hugo Francescuti, the president of the Canadian Medical Association, who says that a largely unproven treatment is now being thrust upon doctors, leaving them caught between at least some patients looking to score drugs and vendors looking to peddle them. "I'm actually quite frightened." Francescuti said some of Canada's 13 licensed marijuana producers are operating in the same way that pharmaceutical companies do. They've got product that they have to move, so they've hired the best advertising firms, he said. Now they've got professional, well-dressed men and women knocking on doctors' offices. That's a problem for Francescuti, at least in part because he doesn't think medical marijuana has been put through stringent enough testing. Frankly, he said, there is a lack of medical evidence that marijuana products are effective. There would have to be a clinical trial for its effect on depression, for its effect on joint pain. You'd have to have probably 1,000 trials that would have to be repeated, he said. If marijuana is so magical, then how come the trials aren't out there? Well, Mr. Francescuti, you're supposed to be an educated doctor, So you would know that it has been illegal since the 50s for anybody to experiment on medical marijuana, thanks to the U.S. government and international law. So, if you don't even know that, I would have to call you a quack. I mean, the president of the Canadian Medical Association doesn't know a single thing about marijuana or why it hasn't been tested properly. I mean, what kind of idiot can he possibly be? I'm flabbergasted when I read that. Illinois legalizes medical marijuana for children with seizures. Illinois children and adults with epilepsy will soon be allowed to use marijuana to ease their symptoms under a law signed on Sunday by Democratic Governor Pat Quinn, the latest in a series of measures loosening restrictions on cannabis by U.S. states. The move to add epilepsy and other seizure disorders to the list of conditions illegal to treat with marijuana or its extracts comes as numerous states have made medical use of the drug legal. 2 states, Colorado and Washington, have legalized its recreational use. This new law will help alleviate the suffering of many adults and children across the state, Quinn said in a statement. Epilepsy is a debilitating condition, and this much-needed relief will help to reduce some of its symptoms for those who endure seizures. The Illinois law, which takes effect in January, would allow children who experience seizures to be treated with non-smokable forms of cannabis, as long as they have permission from a parent. Oregon Marijuana Legalization Initiative qualifies for November ballot. The new approach Oregon Marijuana Legalization Initiative has qualified for the November ballot, the Secretary of State's office reported today. It won't get a measure until next month. A measure number, I mean. The first word came in an email from New Approach Oregon's Anthony Johnson. When the Chronicle contacted Johnson to confirm the email, he said, "I got the call from the Secretary of the State's office today." The initiative had needed some 87,000 valid voter signatures to qualify, and it handed in about 145,000 a couple of weeks ago. That means Oregon will join Alaska in voting on marijuana legalization this year. The District of Columbia is also likely to join that list. The cultivation and possession legalization initiatives there is awaiting certification after handing in more than twice the number of signatures required to make the ballot. Colorado, Washington led the way in 2012. Now at least 2 more states, and probably D.C., have the chance to legalize it this year. And then comes 2016. Colorado's marijuana tourists are banning leftover buds in rental cars at the airport. Pot is not allowed in the airport or across state lines. Since it's iffy to take your pot with you into the airport and onto the plane, especially if you're traveling somewhere particularly prohibitive, many of Colorado's marijuana tourists are leaving their buds behind in their rental cars. According to recent coverage by CBS 4 in Denver, rental car workers at Denver International Airport report that their agency's rental cars have become dumping grounds for leftover weed. It happens quite often, a rental car employee at the national chain told a CBS employee. Every couple of days, I just throw it in the trash. One rental agency employee said that the discoveries are so common, they sometimes happen 4 times in a day. Although pot is illegal for personal use in the Mile High State, signs surrounding DIA warn tourists of possible citation if they bring it with them through the airport. It's also technically illegal to cross state lines with the herb in tow. New York 9-year-old girl with Dravet Syndrome dies without medical marijuana. Drug reform advocates across New York State are demanding emergency access to medical marijuana for critically ill patients after a 9-year-old who suffered from debilitating seizures died last week due to complications with her disorder. Anna Conte, the child whose family has been at the center of New York's medical marijuana debate for months, had a rare condition called Dravet Syndrome that caused her to experience as many as hundreds of crippling seizures every day. Children with similar conditions have successfully treated their symptoms with cannabis in states that have legalized the drug for medical use. New York lawmakers passed a medical marijuana bill last month, but the law won't go into effect for another year and a half. Since its passage, 2 other children with seizure disorders similar to Conte have also died. Advocates say these tragedies exemplify the urgent need to implement the law and are pressing legislatures to speed up the process so terminally ill patients will be able to access medical cannabis sooner than 18 months from now. Several more children are likely to die waiting for New York to implement its medical marijuana program. Judy Netherland, a spokesman for the Drug Policy Alliance, said in a statement Tuesday, "While not all of these deaths can be prevented by medical marijuana, we have a moral obligation to make this medicine available as soon as possible." U.S. drug policy and their border child immigration crisis. The mass migration of tens of thousands of children and adolescents from Central America festered for months before exploding into a full-blown border refugee immigration crisis in the last few weeks, as images of hundreds of children warehoused in temporary holding facilities competed with equally compelling images of crowds of angry Americans loudly protesting their presence. The finger-pointing is in full swing. Much of it centers on the need to secure the border and the Obama administration's alleged failure to do so. Other Republican critics blame the administration's alleged softness on child immigrants as a factor pulling the kids north. Democrats counter that the GOP's blockage of long-pending immigration reform is part of the problem. A lot of the discussion centers around the pull factors, those policies or social or economic realities that draw these immigrants towards the U.S., but equally at play are push factors. These policies or social or economic factors that impel these immigrants to seek new, better lives outside their homelands. There is finger-pointing going on about that too, with some loud, prominent voices placing a good share of the blame on prohibitionist U.S. drug policies in Latin America. Their emphasis on law enforcement and military responses, their balloon effects, and their other unintended consequences. A majority of the child immigrants are coming from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, the so-called Northern Triangle of Central America, also consisting of Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. Those Northern Triangle countries suffered not only devastating civil wars in the 1980s, with the U.S. supporting conservative, often dictatorial governments against leftist popular guerrilla movements, or, in the case of Honduras, serving as a platform for counterinsurgency against the leftist Sandinista government in Nicaragua, as well as chronic poverty and income inequality. I misplaced the graphic for the next story. One sec, I'll go find it. Where did it go? There we go. There we are. Legal marijuana debated at National Press Club. For Bill Piper, there's no doubt that the nation's war on drugs has failed, with 666,000 Americans arrested on marijuana charges last year alone. Should they be arrested or should they not? This is the key question, said Piper, director of the National Affairs for the pro-legalization advocacy organization Drug Policy Alliance. Kevin Sabet, a legalization opponent, had a question of his own. Does the United States want to create a new multi-billion-dollar industry similar to big tobacco that would create more drug addicts? These industries only make money off heavy users. Let's be very clear. We are naive to think that this is about a couple of hippies who want to smoke a joint once a week after work in the basement, said Sabet, who leads the advocacy group Project SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Yeah, those guys are complete idiots. Another sign of its new status in official Washington, marijuana got an airing Thursday at the National Press Club, a journalist institute that has been visited by every president since Theodore Roosevelt. Piper and Sabet, two of the most prominent players in the growing legalization battle, squared off in a one-hour debate, highlighting issues that may soon face Congress and an increasing number of lawmakers and voters across the country. Branson calls for new way in drug war. Virgin Group founder Sir Richard Branson has used his address at the International AIDS Conference in Melbourne to once again call for an alternative approach to prohibitionist drug laws. Sir Richard, a member of the Global Commission on Drug Policy, which in a 2011 report concluded that drug prohibition has been an abject failure, said that while some countries have virtually eliminated drug-related HIV transmissions, drug war policies in the U.S., Russia, and certain Southeast Asian countries are still causing needless infections and AIDS deaths. There has been 4 decades of so-called war on drugs, and it has done terrible things to societies everywhere, Sir Richard told delegates at the International AIDS Conference on Tuesday via video link. It's done damage to drug users, their families, their communities. It's time to put an alternative approach to the prohibitionist framework that has been in effect and has been so ineffective for decades now. Sir Richard said those who use drugs should be treated with compassion rather than being treated as criminals. All right, well, that's the news for this week. Thanks again for joining me on Pot TV here. Don't forget to stay tuned for Jeremiah's show at 4 o'clock. And, of course, we got other shows for you. Tomorrow there's Redbeard's glass-blowing show. I think that's also at 4. And then on Tuesday at 11 is a class in session with Al the Alchemist. And Wednesday at 4, we also have From Under the Influence with Marijuana Man and Al the Alchemist. And Jody does tapes her show on Thursday, and it's usually up on Friday. I know she taped one yesterday, so there'll be one coming up fairly soon. So, thanks again for joining me. I'm Marius Stoner. Remember, marijuana is the most advanced plant on the planet, and we're going to use it to save the world and save ourselves. Until next week, have a great weekend and take care.